writing your story before you turn it into a powerful speech is you want to rewrite it at least 3 times. So slowly take your time when you're writing, because when you're writing your story, you're connecting the pen, the paper, you're taking a few breaths, you're connecting with each word, with each sentence, with each paragraph. And again, this is a healing process. Never forget that. So when you're writing the story, you might want to rewrite it at least 2 or 3 times. Then when you're finished writing it or typing it, you want to do some mirror work. You want to see your facial expressions. You want to see how you smile. You want to see how you look when you're delivering your speech. So you want to go to the mirror. You want to read the story aloud several times, or however many times that you like. But you want to practice reading your story in front of the mirror. And lastly, if you can, you just want to get really familiar with the story. So when you're reading it in front of people, you're performing it, it can come off as really natural. Sometimes I prefer for you to memorize the story, but that's not essential. Just get really comfortable with the story. So keep practicing the story in the mirror, rewrite the story, so when you're doing your speech, it's natural and it's also fun. And the third piece, you want to perform the story using PIPES. So PIPES is an acronym that helps me when I'm on stage or I'm in a library or a community center and I'm asked to speak or perform from the soul. Number 1 is projection, right? You want to make sure you're loud and you're clear. You want to make sure people can hear you because what you have to say is important. Remember, everyone has a story to tell. Either you can whisper it, you can yell it, or you can write it, you can express it. Number 2, I is for inflection. Sometimes during parts of your story, you want to change the pitch and the loudness of your voice as you share different parts, as you move through your story. So P is for projection, loud and clear. I is for inflection. You want to adjust the tone and the pitch and the loudness as you share your speech, as you share your story. Another P is for pacing. You don't want to go too fast. You want to go too fast. You want to go too fast. You don't want to go too slow. You want to find the right pacing between the words, between the sentences, between your beginning, between your middle, and between your end. And just find your style. I'm a bit dramatic. I like to move. I like to smile. I like to pause, right? So you got to find what works for you when you're speaking from the heart. So what do we have? We're going to review really quick. We're not finished yet. We have P is for projection. Make sure you're loud and clear. I is for inflection. Make sure you adjust the pitch and the tone of your voice. P is for pacing. E is for eye contact. So you'll see later on when I deliver my speech, even if I'm reading and I'm comfortable with my story, I'll find some time to connect. It's important to let people know you're connecting with them. So as you're reading or reciting your speech, you want to make sure you're giving eye contact to those who are witnessing what you're expressing. And after eye contact is stance. So when you're standing, you want to make sure you have a good posture. You don't want your hands moving around. You want to find a comfortable, relaxed position. And you want to make sure your stance, it exudes a sense of confidence and a sense of boldness when you're speaking. I love this, I love this, I love this. So again, pipes. When you perform your story, your speech, projection, inflection, pacing, eye contact, and stance. All right, so again, the three phrases to session 2. First is revise and edit, which means you want to make sure your story has a beginning, a middle, and an end to your story. You want to make sure that you are connected to your story. You want to make sure your story has meaning and value to you. You want to make sure, despite the pain in your story, the story is still inspiring because you want to learn something from the story, right? You want the story or the speech to help you grow. And you want to share the story with a teacher or a mentor that can provide you with feedback and help you refine the story as well. Get help, get support. 2 is rewrite, review, and rehearse the story. Slowly take time to rewrite or type the story. I say 2 or 3 times. Then you want to read the story aloud several times. Do your mirror work, okay? Practice and rehearse in the mirror. And then you want to get familiar with your story. If you can try to memorize it so you can be fully self-expressed so it can feel natural. And number 3 to this process, you want to perform your story using the acronym PIPES. Projection, inflection, pacing, eye contact, and stance. Now those who are listening to this video series, why not just take a moment? Just take a moment, right? You have your journal. You spend some time writing your journal. Now you're about to start the process of revising your journal, editing your journal, because you're going to convert or transform or turn this into a speech where you're speaking from the soul. Is that clear? All right. So now it's time to speak. So to give some context, again, this is a journal entry out of my book, Reflections of a Black Man in Trouble. An origin story, because I consider myself a superhero. We are all superheroes. This is my origin story, right? Where I'm decolonizing myself first before I'm confronting an unjust system. So this story is change is hard, and it takes me back to when I moved from a predominantly white, black neighborhood to a predominantly white neighborhood in the mid-'80s. And this story is about racism and racial and social justice, but it's also a coming of age story. I was in young adolescence and trying to find myself. So again, the story is called "The Change is Hard." So one hot, humid summer night, my friends who lived on the same street were hanging out with me in front of Jerome's house. It was late, around 11 p.m., and most likely we were being a little bit noisy. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, a police car suddenly pulls up on us. Surprised and shocked, my friends Jerome and Devontae, we ceased to crack jokes, we stopped dribbling the basketball or talking about sports, and with eyes as wide as the light of the moon, we froze like deer in headlights. And we stood still like mannequins in the storefront window. So next, the cop single-handedly removes himself from the vehicle and he approaches us. Then suddenly out of nowhere, Devontae leaps for the bushes, and in an instant reflex, the cop draws his weapon and points it in our faces and says, "Freeze! Don't you move a muscle." Jesse and I slowly raise our hands into the dark night sky as Devontae lays extended in the pricker bushes in front of Jerome's house. Then the cop runs towards us and he motions for Devontae to get up. Then the cop shoves Devontae over in our direction, and with prickers in his hair, Devontae also raises his hand to the dark night sky. The cop pats us down like petty criminals and thugs, finding non-later wrappers and empty bubblegum wrappers. And he finishes. Without a word, the officer retreats back into his squad car, driving off into the night. We all keep our hands pointed to the night sky long after the officer disappears. And lastly, Jerome and I simultaneously shove Devontae into the pricker bushes again. And it was easier to blame Devontae for his stupidity than to wrap our pre-teenage minds around being racially profiled and potentially gunned down on our street, in our neighborhood, in front of our houses that our parents owned. Change is hard. Who are you? Behind the mask. Who am I? Behind the mask. Who are we behind the mask? So I didn't know I was black, again, until I moved into a predominantly white suburban neighborhood. And early on, after we unpacked our things in our new home, I ventured outside in my new neighborhood. And it was the weekend before I would start my 5th grade year. And surprisingly, my new adventure, I discovered a friend. His name was Bobby K. And not soon after Bobby and I bonded over G.I. Joes and Thundercats, and we decided to speed race our bikes a few laps around our block. Then we settled down to eat some delicious lemon heads from the sidewalk around the corner from our new home. The sidewalk temperature was just right, not a cloud in the sky, and the breeze made me feel at ease. Then just as we were about to get our bikes and go for a ride, a bigger kid approached us. His big frame provided an eclipse of the sun, and the day became immediately less bright. "Hey, Bobby, what are you doing playing with that nigger?" I didn't understand what was going on because that word was new to me. However, something in my body told me that something was wrong with me. Of course, Bobby was white, the Eclipse boy was white, and I was black. I sat frozen as Bobby quickly gathered his things and left with the Eclipse boy. I didn't share this with my parents. I didn't share it with anyone. So the first week of school started in disaster. As I waited in line right before recess, I vomited in the line all over the carpet. I spent the rest of the day in the nurse's office because my mom and dad couldn't pick me up. On the second day, I redeemed myself during recess. Stepped outside on a gigantic playground, amazed as kids ecstatically ran wild towards the swings or the jungle gym. Other kids formed lines to race each other on our mini track. So exciting. But I made my way over to the ruckus and chaos happening by the big oak tree. Each boy squared off against another boy to determine the king of the battle royale. Ever since WrestleMania in 1985, with Sergeant Slaughter, Mr. T, Hulk Hogan, and Andre the Giant, wrestling for young boys determines one's fate in the hierarchy on the playground. I eased my way into the line as I watched Damon Stinkley destroy and toss each competitor aside like a feather. Ding. Damon looked strong and unbeatable as I continued to witness his absolute dominance. Next, I squared off against Damon, and his initial bull rush did not work against my quickness, lateral movement, and my great sense of balance. He tried. I slid around him. He used his brute strength. I used my leverage and my instincts. And as each second passed, more and more kids flocked over to see this spectacular match. Internally, I knew that as I continued to outlast him with my speed, quickness, and endurance, he would tire out. And lastly, he made this last attempt to slam me, and we locked horns like rams, and we began to spin around like gymnasts. Then I heard, "A tie, a tie, a tie." I heard voices shouting in unison. Damon was crushed. For Damon, a tie meant a chink in his armor. And for me, I moved up the ladder into one of the toughest but smallest kids in 5th grade. So for my elementary school students, that story really spoke to my toughness and my resilience and my ability to keep moving and to keep going. Change is hard. For my high school students, my speech is called A Night to Forget. And this story is about my conversion to the religion of Islam at the age of 17. It's one of my first experiences at the temple called the masjid. So one Saturday, I got a call to attend the Saturday evening cookout at the mosque or the temple. Of course, I did not tell my parents, and excitedly I jumped on my green mountain bike, setting out on my adventure to get to the mosque or the temple. And with each turn of my pedal, I felt the burn in my quadriceps and thighs, probably because my bike was so old and I was putting so much pressure on the front wheels of the tire. And I pedaled and pedaled as I passed mansion-like houses, and they changed from grandiose with multiple round driveways and freshly manicured lawns into single-family or two-story dilapidated units. I pedaled with awe at how the environment changes from riding along the beautiful Shaker Lakes to the hardcore smell of the urban decay on Martin Luther King Boulevard. Lastly, I pedaled quickly up the steep driveway till I saw this big old masjid or temple. I ring the doorbell, and a brother with a funny voice and a pot belly ushers me inside. I place my shoes neatly next to 2 rows of different styles of sneakers and sandals and boots. I went in and glided past the security desk, making a left to a small bathroom to make wudu. And wudu is like ablution before we pray. I arrived just in time to make the evening prayer. I entered the prayer room, tiptoeing like a cat burglar on a freshly vacuumed green carpet. I see brothers praying while others are sitting talking quietly against the walls of the small dark room. Then I look directly ahead of me, seeing a wooden pulpit. Then suddenly a tall, imposing figure swiftly walks directly towards me in front of the prayer room. He gives instructions for announcing the prayer. He was our imam, or like our preacher. We all jump in lines and rows shoulder to shoulder, listening to the words of the imam, reciting the Holy Quran. Wow. Soon after the 5-minute prayer ends, the imam disappears to his chambers upstairs. And then some head straight into the parking lot for the cookout. I follow another group of brothers upstairs into a room where we sit outside of a table. I sit nervously waiting for something to happen. And to my astonishment, we spent a few hours learning about the life of our prophet Muhammad. I observed spirited discussions about how to apply the lessons of the prophet's life in today's times. I quietly observed all the heated and inspiring conversations. Nothing but me comes from a smile. I'm really enjoying this. I think to myself, however, as the night moves forward, something is gnawing at my spirit. Something didn't feel good. I ignore it. Early in the evening, I made a futile attempt to call my parents from a payphone, but it was out of order. Someone says, "Where's Morris?" busts in the room with a cryptic tone. "Come with me now." My legs were wobbly, my head was spinning as I rushed behind the brother down the steep, narrow stairs out of the screen door in the crowded parking lot, perched on a hill. At this point, I'm out of breath, weaving in and out of brothers trying to make way down to the street. There's commotion. I hear screaming and shouting. I finally maneuver past the last few brothers to see a tall, slender brother with cornrows pointing a handgun a few feet from the direction of my mom, who was desperately trying to pull my father back towards the car. Time stands still, and I jog like quicksand in my Puma sneakers straight towards the brother. I shout, "That's my father!" And without hesitation, I push his entire arm down towards the grassy hill. I continue down the hill trying to calm my father, who was still lunging, attempting to force his way up the hill to confront the brother with the pistol. Eventually, I managed to pull him backwards as he finally listens to my mom as she screams, "Mo, get into the car and let's go." We speed off down the street. We arrive home and rush inside the kitchen. There I stand in the vortex of my mom, dad, and sister screaming to me about how I joined the dangerous cult. That was really the worst night of my life. And as I reflect back on that story, I learned a lot from those two experiences and how they changed my life. From change is hard, and also a night to remember. Hopefully you got some passion and some inspiration from my journal entries and my speaking. And remember, you got to feel it to heal it, to name it to tame it. This is Morris Howard Ervin Jr. Thank you for these series. Peace.